Cinema is an incredibly difficult art form to analyze, to look at a movie, break it down, the creation of a story coupled with images built on performances highlighted by lighting and sound. It's a collaborative effort, no doubt. Um, One that you would have to be a complete and utter moron to believe that a single filmmaker creates a singular idea, while at the same time there are films that reflect their director's vision. You see patterns. If you watch enough of a filmmaker's filmography, you get a sense of who they are, what they're about, their beliefs, their attitudes, their ideas. You get an idea of their passions. I think with someone like Martin Scorsese, there's obviously crime, guilt, redemption, Catholicism. With Coppola, you have a sense of power structures, America, capitalism, the hero's journey, the disillusion of the hero. Spielberg, obviously, the Boy Scout, the fractured family, the willfulness to succeed, to overcome. These three directors in particular have style. But you could see that with Brian De Palma. You could see it with Paul Schrader. You could see it with Christopher Nolan, with David Fincher, with Spike Jonze. You can see it with so many others. You can see patterns. And one of the interesting things about a filmmaker is to watch what they do, and as they come to the end of their careers, to look at the entire picture, to look at the whole of a filmography to give you an idea of who they are. This past week we lost one of the great 1970s filmmakers, William Friedkin, director of such acclaimed films as The French Connection, To Live and Die in L.A., The Exorcist, Sorcerer, and sadly, as with all directors, as with all great artists, there comes a point where, and especially with film, because film is such an expensive art form, it's so incredibly expensive. There's not a lot of room for failure. There's not a lot of room for critical success at the expense of box office. People can critics can love a film and champion it all they want. But if that word of mouth doesn't get a film seen, if it doesn't put asses in the seats, if it doesn't get rentals, if it doesn't nowadays get you stream hits, what you're going to find yourself is a short life. In a way, the directors of early cinema, from the beginnings of cinema in the late 1800s, 1890s, to Nickelodeons and that kind of thing, into the silent era of filmmaking, as was showcased in Damien Chazelle's Babylon, with such prominent figures as Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, Chaplin, Keaton, Mary Pickford, Lillian Gish, Errol Flynn, Douglas Fairbanks Sr., all of these people. They were the only option. They were the only party in town. So people were excited about getting out. They were excited about going to the movies. They were excited about this communal experience that that helped them recognize story, that helped them recognize great acting, that helped them recognize humanity. This is a long introduction to something that I think is a little bit more obvious and a little bit more to the point. I mentioned the passing of William Friedkin, and I could easily sit here and go over The Exorcist. I could go over The French Connection, which we're going to be doing probably at the end of the month or at the end of next month. I'm not really sure when we're planning to talk about The French Connection. We could talk about The Exorcist again, as we have done on an earlier episode. I think we talked about. We didn't dedicate an episode to The Exorcist, but we talked about The Exorcist in one of our marathon episodes regarding the devil from probably 4 years ago. I could talk about those movies. I could talk about films in his later career, including To Live and Die in L.A., The Hunted with Benicio del Toro and Tommy Lee Jones, a really underrated film, or one of his last films, one of his last theatrical narratives, Matthew McConaughey and Killer Joe, which I thought was just a fucking fantastic, ridiculous movie. But we're not going to get into that because that's a conversation that I want to have with Mr. Chavez. What I want to bring to light, what I want to shine a light on is I like these opportunities to take a look at a filmmaker and find something that they did that is not necessarily in keeping with the majority of a filmmaker's filmography. And I think the film of Friedkin's that stands out the most in that regard is a 1978 very, very rarely seen, very rarely screened heist film called The Brink's Job, which I know anybody who's listening to right now is going to say, wait a minute, what the fuck is this? Unless you're a fan of both Friedkin, you're a fan of obscure 1970s films, and you're a fan of Peter Falk, who I fall into just about every category there. And when I heard that this film existed, and it was being given a Blu-ray release on Kino Lorber, which is actually one of the better distribution companies that you can go with, Kino Lorber. I mean, there used to be a time when Criterion was the only game in town, and then came Arrow, Shout, Kino Lorber, so many other boutique, Olive. There's so many out there that are vying for films and are looking to bring them to you, and that's particularly satisfying and exciting for people like myself and people like you out there who continue to collect physical media. In many cases, you can't find these things anywhere. You just, they're not streamed. They're not. I have a friend who somehow finds obscure movies on the internet, but even then, it's sometimes subtitles aren't there. Sometimes it's the films are in the wrong aspect ratios. Sometimes they are they're not presented correctly. Well, these Blu-ray companies, for the most part, go out of their way to present something in keeping with what the director was striving for. So, that being the case, I finally saw this movie, The Brink's Job, when Kino Lorber released it a couple of years ago on Blu-ray, and I saw it, and I was just like, I was laughing. I had a good time with it. It's not a great film. It's not an exceptional film. It's not a film that's going to stand with The Exorcist or The French Connection or To Live and Die in L.A. It's not a film that supplants those films in any way. But what made me want to talk about it today was that to talk about Billy Friedkin, you go to the obvious films. You go to the film that put him on the map, The French Connection. You go to the one that he won his Oscar for, and I think he might have won for The French Connection as well. Um, but I'm pretty sure he won for The Exorcist. Later on, his comeback film, To Live and Die in L.A., a late period comeback film, Killer Joe, but also a film that is only now being recognized as a masterpiece, and one which Mr. Chavez and I sat down and discussed many, many episodes ago. If you're looking for the films, if you're looking for these films, go in. If you're looking for these discussions, go to Libsyn.com, watch this RickRamos, and you'll find what the back issues, basically the reviews that we've done, the discussions that we've had, all of them films that were exciting to us, all of them discussions that we were either very passionate in our conversation, or sad and disappointed by certain films that just didn't live up to the hype, and sometimes arguments between myself and Mr. Chavez on our interpretation and our understanding. I mean, for as much as we agree, we oftentimes disagree, and we disagree sometimes very vocally, very very strongly, and with most critics and most people who do what we do, a lot of times the argument is the fun. The argument is trying to get the other one to understand something that they are missing. So that's one factor. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert used to do it. Anybody else who ever hosted a weekly movie review show did the same thing. That's the thing. We love certain films, and we can't understand why somebody else would not feel the same way. But we do realize that it happens. And that being said, this is definitely a film that I don't think Ibrahim would have embraced. Not that I can read his mind, not that I can always know on point what he's gonna like or dislike. But as with all friends, when you know somebody well enough, and you've talked and discussed, and you've gotten a sense of what they do like and what they do have a problem with, it's a little bit easier to make predictions. That being said, I don't see him taking to this particular film, or at least wanting to talk about it. And that being that, maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe it'd be something that would fall into his top 10, and I'm missing out on what could possibly be a good conversation. If he listens to this episode, he'll be able to comment on that and talk to me about it. Maybe spark an interest, The fact of the matter is that I can't be sure. I can't be positive about that. But the thing that I can say is that, for my feelings, I like the fact that Friedkin is a director Friedkin is a forceful director. Friedkin is a somewhat maniacal, very, very strong-willed, very imposing figure who, in Peter Biskin's Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll book of 1970s American cinema, Raging Bulls, Easy Riders and Raging Bulls, Friedkin doesn't come off very well. And I don't think any of those guys really did come off too well. The level of ego, the level of naivete, the level of pure bastard behavior made a lot of these guys look bad. And I think Friedkin was definitely one of those guys. But I think you have to have that in a sense in order to be a filmmaker. I think you have to have a level of ego and self self-consuming bastard qualities that puts everybody over there and you right here being a driving force. I think I tried directing once and it didn't really work for me because the level of insecurity, the level of not understanding what kind of vision was needed in order to make that happen was detrimental to the project. With your great directors, however they may be insecure about the project that they are doing, it rarely, if ever, comes out. And there's a forcefulness in what they do and what they're able to achieve. The Brink's job does not fall into your standard Friedkin type of filmography. It's a heist film, which I can see Friedkin really digging into. But it's also designed somewhat as a comedy with a cast of characters that are in some ways buffoonish. The great film critic Roger Ebert, in discussing this film, compared it to a little seen Italian film called Big Deal on Madonna Street. I think that's with Marcello Mastroianni. I've seen it many years ago, but I haven't seen it in quite some time. If I'm not mistaken, it's on my Criterion shelf and it's just sitting there, and it's a fun little heist film. Heist films are fun because it's just, sometimes it's all about taking you into a world that is both frightening and fascinating and exciting. And there's a lot of times this sense of being unsure of what's around the corner, being unsure of how dangerous a situation might be. The Brink's job is fun. The Brink's job is a lot of fun, while at the same time it does a weird kind of balancing act. And I think Friedkin wrote in his biography, or at least something that I picked up off of Wikipedia, that it's the film that moved the farthest from what his original intention for it was. And that being the case, I think part of that is it's really a testament. The quality of the film is really a testament to Friedkin's talent as a filmmaker, because it's an endlessly watchable film. It's a very fun, good film. It's interesting. It keeps you interested. You want to know what's going to happen from one scene to the next. You're going to want to know what's going to happen to this bumbling group of thieves who are very capable of what they're doing. But as with all types of situations, there's always a little bit of stupidity involved. There's always a little bit of untrustworthiness. There's always a weak link that makes it very difficult to see a positive and successful outcome. What's strange about this film is that it's based on a true story. It's the largest heist in American history up to the time. Something like 1.5, maybe $2 billion of armored car storage. And it's very interesting because Friedkin's taken a look at this film is primarily Friedkin as a hired hand, and it doesn't have the passion that his earlier, some of his later films would have. And I think that's kind of interesting to see, because what you notice with what he does is not necessarily this high production value, intricate. This is not heavy and overpowering filmmaking. This is not the kind of film where you're overwhelmed by a sense of importance, like you would definitely see with the heroin trade and police brutality, racism. A lot of those things are factored into the film, but they resonate differently today, and that's going to be an interesting conversation between me and Mr. Chavez when we have it in a couple of weeks. But it's not dealing with overwhelming ideas of what God is, what good versus evil is, what God and the devil, as you have with the battle for a 12, 13-year-old girl's soul in The Exorcist. That's just not what it is. This is just a straight heist story. And it's not an overwhelming comedy. You're not sitting here laughing out loud, falling out of your seat. It's not the kind of comedy where it's not The Naked Gun, it's not Airplane, it's not Ricky Bobby, it's not, Talladega Nights, Ricky Bobby, it's not Bridesmaids, it's not laugh out loud, it's chuckling kind of comedy, chuckling at a scene, at a scenario, chuckling at the ridiculousness of something. And what's great is that this is a beautifully nuanced ensemble cast that does really great work, and they play off each other beautifully. This is a film that just really it's a hell of a lot better than it deserves to be. It has a much better cast than it deserves to have. I mean, we're talking about Peter Falk in the lead role as a lifetime criminal who may be really good at what he does, or might be just full of shit. There's Peter Boyle as the fence, the money launderer. Alan Garfield, if you knew him, he was the police chief in Beverly Hills Cop 2, real asshole, and he normally played assholes and blowhards in a lot of his films. In this film, he plays somewhat of a blowhard dimwit, who is Peter Falk's brother-in-law. You have Warren Oates in a really weird kind of performance where Oates could do no wrong as far as I was concerned. I mean, when I first became aware of him, as a lot of people, and I'm sad to say, but it's in Stripes, and I loved him as Sergeant Hulk. But then my dad introduced me to him in The Wild Bunch, and I just, as one of the Gorge brothers, he was just fucking great. And he had, throughout his career, he had a certain kind of vulnerability and toughness with him that few actors are able to really achieve. A toughness that you saw he could handle himself, a vulnerability where you knew there was a deep sadness with him and he wasn't afraid of going to that place. If you ever watch Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, that's watch it and then go back to our episode, because we talk at great length of the brilliance of his performance and the wild and unsettling nature of that movie. It's really one of the great underseen classics of the 1970s, probably Sam Peckinpah's personal masterpiece. I don't know if I would still stick with The Wild Bunch as his critical and artistic masterpiece, but there's something about Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia that really was like an exorcism. And there are moments in this film where Warren Oates captures that vulnerability and passion, the blowhardedness. He's fun. He's an interesting character. And then you slowly start to realize, wait a minute, this guy's fucking crazy. This guy might not be right. You also have, as part of the game, Paul Sorvino as I'm not really sure what his job is, and there's a guy named Kevin O'Connor. So there's a great supporting cast, including Gena Rowlands, who it's interesting to see Gena Rowlands and Peter Falk playing husband and wife again a couple of years. This is 1978, a couple of years after A Woman Under the Influence, which, if you haven't seen it, that's one of the all-time great performances. That might be, for my money, the greatest performance ever captured on film. And I know what you're saying. Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle, De Niro is Bickle, De Niro is Jake LaMotta, Pacino is Michael Corleone, Olivier, yeah, but there is something about Gena Rowlands in that film that is beyond brilliant. She is somewhat wasted in this film, but there is her presence. Although I wanted to see more of her, although I wanted to see more interaction, her presence alone just kind of brings life to this marriage between her and Peter Falk that I don't doubt for one second. I don't believe that it couldn't be. So this film, it takes place in Boston in the late 30s. Okay, wait a minute. In the 40s. Opens with a heist. Peter Falk ends up going to prison. Comes out a few years later. Working a regular job, but also hustling on the side, because a career criminal is a career criminal. It's not just the fact that I don't want to work a straight job. It's the juice that you get off of a heist, off of stealing something. And this is where movies are so beautiful at capturing this. It's the cat and mouse. It's the moving the chess pieces into place. How is a heist going to work? And heist films are great, from this through the original Ocean's 11 into Soderbergh's Ocean's 11, 12, 13 remake, Ocean's 8, which was a lot better than a lot of people want to give it credit for because it was women, I guess. What else? The great French classic Rififi by the great blacklisted American director Jules Dassin. You can go back. There's an episode that I did on that one that was just me raving about the brilliance of that movie. Is this film on that level? No. This is a different kind of film. This is more of a character study film, and the beauty of it is watching this bumbling group of ex-cons, professional criminals, thieves, who are putting together the biggest heist that the country has ever known. All of it being led by Peter Falk. Now, Peter Falk, I've talked about a number of times in the past. Talked a little bit about him on the Princess Bride episode. Definitely talked about him when Ibrahim and I talked about Wings of Desire. And the interesting thing about Falk is he's hard to get a handle on outside of Columbo, the famed detective that he played for probably almost 3 decades, from the mid 1970s through to the early 2000s. Just a brilliant performance. But the thing with Falk, it's always a variation of Columbo, which I'm not putting down, and I'm not saying, because the problem isn't Columbo. The problem is with us being unable to see him as anything other than Columbo. But it's sometimes the darker sides of Columbo, the more criminal elements, whether it's Tony Pino in the Brink's Job, or the wrestling manager from All the Marbles. If you haven't seen that film, fucking please make time to see it. That's Robert Aldrich's last film, and just a great women's wrestling 1980s, very under the radar type film that was big, that was really big for us in the 1980s, as we caught it numerous times on, HBO, the movie channel, then later on USA, the USA channel, all of that shit. It was just, TBS, all just really, God, going down memory lane on this one. But I loved it. I loved that. It's a character study. And when you have interesting characters that are compelling, that are fun, that are likable, that are real, it makes you want to keep coming back to it. It makes you want to become involved in the story, invest. It makes you want to give yourself to whatever is happening on that screen so that you can grow a little bit, I guess. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about stories is that when we watch them, we learn a little bit more about ourselves and the people around us. And with movies, it's a lot of it is, well, that's Hollywoodification. But in some cases, you see real life people and how they would react. The coolness, the cockiness, that cat that ate the canary smile that Peter Falk has throughout this film is so compelling. It's so enchanting, really, because you're watching it and you're just like, I get this guy. I understand what he's about. I like this guy. He's a two-time loser or whatever. He's going to prison. But the interesting thing about this real life case, they stole something like $1.5 million, $2 million. They were coming close to beating the statute of limitations, and then one of the gang members cracks, gives everybody up. All of those men ended up going to prison for like 14 years. But when they got out, they retired very comfortably. Here's the thing. The FBI, who attached themselves to this case and spent something like $25 to $28 million to investigate and then prosecute, they never collected the money. They collected something like $50,000 out of $1.5 million. Nobody knows exactly what happened. So it would be interesting. It would be interesting to dig into this. And that's one of the good things, that these films are source material. The source material sometimes are books, sometimes are newspaper articles, sometimes are magazine exposés. But they're stories that happen in the world. And they happen to people that you and I both know. And I just find myself overwhelmed by that. I find myself really taken aback and laughing hysterically. I mean, this is not a laugh out loud film, but there are definitely moments where you chuckle, where you break, where you're in a room by yourself and you can hear yourself laugh. You can hear laughter, and then you're wondering, wait, what? And oh, that's me. I'm laughing. I don't know if anybody else does that, but it's like, I don't find myself laughing too often when I'm by myself watching a movie. But this one was one that compelled me. This is the one that caught my attention. This has been an interesting movie week. As many of you know, because I've mentioned a number of times, I started a new job, and they're working the shit out of me, and it's very difficult to find time to prep these movies, to record. Ibrahim and I are trying to figure out a window so that we can continue working together and do this. My family, I don't get to see them as much as I want to. Now that I have the job and I have this fucking dog that is driving me nuts. I love the little shit, but he's crazier than a shithouse rat, and if you've never seen a bull terrier, if you've never had one, bring up bull terriers on YouTube and watch as they just go crazy running. They have this real wild sense, and he does too. And it's just, I don't know. I'm in love. I never had kids of my own, and I've turned into one of those assholes who just loves their pets, and that's where I'm at now. So, I don't have the time that I once did, but the passion is still there. Yesterday, I went to I went to visit my mom and dad, have dinner, spent some time with my nephew, and we watched Yojimbo. So I've introduced him to a number of different films over the years. I started with stuff that I thought he would really be into. Some Jackie Chan. Well, I think I did. I think I did Carpenter first. I think we did Big Trouble in Little China. Then we went into The Thing. We also saw, I showed him The Blues Brothers. The Blues Brothers are showing Tuesday night, so we're going to see that. That's going to be really exciting to see it in a movie theater. I started taking him to see They Live. And then slowly I started putting older films, classics. I showed him The Maltese Falcon, which he really dug. I showed him some Jackie Chan films, including Drunken Master 2 and Police Stories 1 and 2. He loved that. And, of course, it's a lot of kicking, it's a lot of fighting, it's crazy stunt work. It's amazing. And I love that I can bring that to him. Yesterday, I took a real gamble when I showed him Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, and he had a great time with it. He loved it. And he wanted to study Japanese, but where the hell is he gonna to speak a language? You have to use a language, and unless I get him a job in a Japanese restaurant, which is the entire cook staff is Mexican anyway. I mean, how are you going to learn the language? So write your letters of offense into Watch This with RickRamos, gondoramos at yahoo.com. That'll give you an opportunity to go to task on me. But the thing about it is that movies are a great way to connect with other people. And they're beautiful in that respect, where it's like I get to share something with somebody. I get to show them something that meant the world to me at a certain time, and still has this power over me. And the hope is that one day he will discover movies on his own and will bring them to me. And with that hope will be one day, hey Nino, have you ever seen this movie called The French Connection? It's like, and you don't want to be a complete asshole by saying, "Who the fuck are you to tell me about Billy Friedkin? Come on, get the fuck out of here." No, I would be like, "Oh, really? Yeah, I know The French Connection. One of the great car chase scenes ever." Or coming up to me and say, "Have you ever heard of this movie called Taxi Driver?" And I'm like, "Take a seat. Let's have a little bit of a conversation and try to understand the world around us." That's the beauty. That's the power. And if you're someone who loves books, movies, music, part of the greatness of your passion, and I think it's the thing that made me want to do this show originally, was to show people, yeah, there are great movies that you can see in the movie theaters, and there are movies that mean a hell of a lot to you, but there are also these movies, and this is if you like this, maybe you should check this out, or if you like that, here's something that might pique your interest. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not. I've had a lot of people who say, "Thank you for introducing this film to me." And then I've had other people say, "Why the fuck would you ever think anybody would want to watch this particular film?" The fact of the matter is that I don't know. The truth is that I go with what works for me. I go with the movies that hit some kind of personal personal sense of purpose, fun, excitement, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I get excited when I watch something that is really either funny or where something that digs into the soul. I think that's why Scorsese is somebody that resonates with me, from Taxi Driver through Raging Bull, through Goodfellas, through Bringing Out the Dead. into Hugo, The Irishman, and now Killers of the Flower Moon. I'm excited. But the sad thing is to know that Martin Scorsese's 80 years old. He's almost 80 years old, if he's not 80 years old. There's not going to be a whole lot of films left. There's not going to be a whole lot more to look forward to. And Friedkin brings that to a blunt point. With his passing at the age of 87, you get the sense that one more piece of the foundation is removed from what is great cinema. Yes, the films are still there. Yes, Some Like It Hot, The Apartment, The Wild Bunch, The General, The Wizard of Oz. The films are there. We can go to them. But there is a sadness in knowing that the filmmakers will only be here for so long. I saw some post with the passing of Billy Friedkin. There were pictures of Robert Benton, I think, Roman Polanski, Woody Allen, and Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood is 93. I think Roman Polanski is in his mid to late 80s. Robert Benton is almost 90. Woody Allen is like 86, 87. There's not a lot of time left. And there's a part of me that feels like, shit, I'm depending on somebody else's art to fill that space. When the truth is that I should be creating my own art. I should be creating my own thing. And in a way, this show is that. This is not just somebody talking out of their ass about movies. Oh, I like this because it was kind of cool. No. I want to know about what digs deep. I want to find that thing in me that made me embrace this particular film. That made me think about Raging Bull 10, 15, 20 years later. Just the beauty of LaMotta dancing in the ring with light flashes going off, light bulbs going off. The smoke and the stillness of the air. I'm passionate about films that really dig deep and help me understand myself. Midnight Run, I got a poster of it on my wall. Hard Times. I've talked in the past about the brilliance of Walter Hill and the sadness that the films aren't what they once were, but we're lucky to have the films that we have. With Friedkin, I can honestly say I came to him late, and I'm still discovering great things here and there. Is The Brink's Job a great film? No. Look, if you want to watch The French Connection again, if you want to watch The Exorcist again, and you're trying to scare the shit out of somebody, yeah, that's the way to go. But if you know Friedkin's work, if you're a fan of what he did, do yourself a favor and branch out and see some of the stuff that maybe didn't get the attention that it deserved. Sorcerer, Killer Joe, The Brink's Job. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Maybe you will. But I think there's a part of you that will consider watching this and other of his films a good time. And that's all we deserve, and that's all we're owed. A good time. I hope you've had a good time. I hope you're enjoying what we do. Once again, what we do here is a labor of love. We don't charge for the podcast. We don't offer anything like that. We want as many people as possible to have the opportunity to listen to our bullshit and what we have to say on a weekly basis. That being said, we have set up a kind of GoFundMe thing with a company called buymeacoffee.com, and ours is buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos. You can donate any amount that you want, $1, $3, $5, $10, whatever, and you don't have to. You can just keep listening. We love that you listen, but it's hard to keep the lights on and it's hard to keep going. We got to dig deep. Whatever you can give, whatever you can find, and if you wish you could, well, we understand that too. But you go to buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos. You can donate there. Whatever you can give, we will appreciate. And we'll be back next week. Mr. Chavez and I will be talking Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, unless some other bullshit comes up. But I'm excited because I'm seeing it for the second time on Tuesday in IMAX 70mm, and sadly, mine is one of 19 theaters in the country where you can do this. We're going to talk about that, and that was a big argument between me and Mr. Chavez concerning that screening and that aspect of the review. But we're going to talk about it all. I hope you had a great time. I hope that you can give. buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos. This has been a good time, and I hope if you give this film a chance, you'll like it. It's not going to change anything. It's not going to supplant The French Connection or The Exorcist on your list of greatest films ever made. But it's a fun, ridiculous, and kind of cute little heist film that you probably was not aware of. So, take a listen and take a watch. This has been a good time. My name is Rick Ramos. Thank you so much.